They killed El Mencho, Mexico's most wanted man, dead, but his cartel had one final demand: a funeral, armed gunmen, thousands of loyalists, all converging on one location. The army had two choices: let it happen or show up. They showed up, and what followed was hell. The body, the burial, and the cartel's goodbye. On February 22, 2026, the most wanted man in the entire Western Hemisphere was killed by the Mexican military. His name was Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, but the world knew him as El Mencho, the founder and iron-fisted leader of the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, or CJNG, one of the most dominant and violent criminal syndicates in Mexico. A man with a $15 million bounty on his head, a man whose empire stretched across 6 of 7 continents, and now he was dead. But here's the thing nobody was prepared for. It wasn't just the killing that shook Mexico to its very foundations. It was what happened after. It was the body, the question of what to do with it, the whispered plans for a funeral, and the terrifying, very real possibility that the most powerful drug cartel in the Western Hemisphere was going to organize a burial ceremony for their fallen leader, and that the Mexican army was going to show up at that funeral. What followed was a chain of events so chaotic, so deeply disturbing, and so consequential that by the time the dust had settled, over 73 people were dead, 250 roadblocks had turned entire highways into war zones, and a nation of over 130 million people was forced to lock its doors and pray. So let's start from the moment the bullet entered his body. Let's start from the very beginning. And let's not leave a single detail out, because this story, every single agonizing piece of it, deserves to be told in full. The small town of Tapalpa is a quiet mountainous settlement, roughly 2 hours southwest of Guadalajara, nestled in the kind of rugged terrain that makes it a perfect hideout for a man who has been running from governments for years. And that is precisely why El Mencho was there. According to Mexico's Defense Secretary, General Ricardo Trevilla, the military had been tracking one of El Mencho's romantic partners for days. On February 20th, a trusted associate was monitored transporting that romantic partner to a rural property in Tapalpa. By February 21st, surveillance had confirmed not only El Mencho's presence at that location, but also the presence of a fully armed security detail surrounding the property. The net was closing, and El Mencho had no idea.
This was a very, very effective takedown of one of the biggest leaders, and it was done, based on the intelligence that they conducted primarily.
The Mexican Army, the National Guard, the Mexican Air Force, and the Attorney General's office all coordinated a joint assault that began before the sun had even thought about rising on February 22nd. Ground troops established a cordon around the property. Air support circled overhead, and when the order was given, the assault team moved in and immediately walked straight into a hailstorm of gunfire. CJNG gunmen opened up with high-caliber weapons, and the shootout that followed was as intense as anything you'd see on a battlefield. 4 cartel members were killed on the spot, but El Mencho was not among them. In the chaos, he and his closest bodyguards fled the compound and retreated into the surrounding woods, making for a second location, a cabin deeper in the forest. Special forces pursued. A second firefight erupted. This time, El Mencho was critically wounded. A military helicopter involved in the operation was hit and forced to make an emergency landing in Sayula. El Mencho and his 2 bodyguards were airlifted out, but all 3 died during the evacuation. The flight was diverted first to Morelia, then to Mexico City for security reasons. But it didn't matter. The most wanted man in Mexico was already gone.
In total, at least 73 people died in the military operation that killed the man known as El Mencho.
El Mencho's corpse was transported under a heavy National Guard convoy to the Specialized Prosecutor's Office for Organized Crime in Mexico City. The body was positively identified by the Attorney General's office. And then came the announcement that sent a wave of anxiety through every security analyst in the hemisphere. The body would be released to his family for private disposition. That meant cremation, burial, or, and this was what terrified everyone, a cartel-organized funeral. You see, in Mexico, the death of a cartel leader does not just end with a body bag and a coroner's report. These are not ordinary criminals. They are, in the minds of their followers, practically royalty. And royalty gets a funeral. Journalist Lolita de la Vega expressed hope that the family would opt for a low-key, holy burial to prevent further unrest, referencing how past doubts about the deaths of cartel leaders had fueled ongoing conflicts. But hope hope is a fragile thing in narco country. In 2017, the wake for Jesus Perez, known as El Ojos, of the Tláhuac cartel in Mexico City involved a massive gathering where armed individuals were arrested amid fears of shootouts. In 2020, the funeral of Rodrigo El Chino Antrax Arechiga from the Sinaloa cartel was handled discreetly by his family, and even that was barely enough to prevent catastrophe. But perhaps the most chilling precedent of all, in December of 2025, just 2 months before El Mencho's death, CJNG members stormed the wake of El Mencho's own brother in Tlaquepaque. They mistook the gathering for a rival event and turned it into a violent standoff. El Mencho's own brother's funeral became a battleground. Now imagine what would happen at El Mencho's. The Mexican government was not about to take that chance. The military placed the prosecutor's office under heavy guard. Troops were deployed in a wide perimeter. The message was clear. If anyone from the cartel tried to organize a public spectacle, the army would be there, and the army would not be there to pay its respects. It would be there to make sure things did not spiral into a massacre. And in the world of Mexican cartel politics, the difference between a funeral and a massacre is often nothing more than a single misplaced bullet. Authorities braced for the worst. Analysts warned that such a funeral event could become a flashpoint, attracting armed loyalists or rivals and leading to armed confrontations. Because in this world, the people who come to mourn are the same people who carry automatic weapons under their jackets, and the rivals who want to send a message, they don't send flowers. And here is what makes this entire situation even more terrifying. The violence that erupted was not even about the funeral yet. That was just the cartel's initial reaction to El Mencho's death. The funeral had not even been planned. The body was still in a government building. Now, to understand how a man who had evaded every government on the planet for over a decade finally met his end, you need to understand just how powerful El Mencho truly was, because this was not some mid-level dealer operating out of a basement. The hunt, the raid, and the death of a kingpin. El Mencho was a man who ran a criminal empire that operated on 6 of the 7 continents, trafficking fentanyl, cocaine, heroin, and methamphetamine across the globe, with a $15 million U.S. bounty on his head.
This was one of the most significant actions undertaken in the history of drug trafficking.
One of the most significant actions in the history of drug trafficking. Think about that. And the former DEA official was not exaggerating.
Because we're talking about someone that is almost at the same level as Chapo Guzman and El Mayo Zambada.
The same level as Chapo Guzman. Let that sit with you for a moment. El Mencho rose from a low-level street dealer who was arrested in 1992 in Sacramento, California, for conspiring to sell heroin. He was deported back to Mexico, and instead of disappearing into obscurity, he built one of the most feared criminal organizations on the face of the earth. Under his command, CJNG expanded aggressively, clashing with rivals like the Sinaloa cartel and employing brutal tactics, including drone attacks and improvised explosives to dominate territories. And his power spread like tentacles across Mexico, with a significant presence in more than 20 of Mexico's 32 states. Previous attempts to apprehend him had failed spectacularly. In 2015, during an operation in Villa Purificación, the cartel downed a military helicopter with a rocket-propelled grenade. That is not a criminal organization. That is a small army. So how, after all of those failed attempts, did the Mexican government finally get him? The answer lies in the oldest weakness known to mankind: a romantic partner. Authorities tracked El Mencho through a close associate linked to one of his romantic partners who visited the Tapalpa site on February 20th. That single tip, combined with U.S. intelligence support from the Joint Interagency Task Force Counter-Cartel, led by Brigadier General Mauricio Calabrese, supplying mapping data and movement tracking, gave the Mexicans exactly what they needed: a location, a confirmation, and a window.
President Claudia Sheinbaum denied direct U.S. involvement in the operation, but acknowledged the Americans did provide intelligence.
And the Mexican president herself confirmed this in her own words the following day.
No hay participación en la operación de fuerzas de Estados Unidos. Lo que hay es mucho intercambio de información, como lo hemos dicho aquí varias veces.
Exchange of information. That was the polite way of saying that without American intelligence, this operation might never have happened. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt praised the operation as a joint effort targeting a key fentanyl trafficker, and U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Christopher Landau called the killing a great development for Mexico, the United States, Latin America, and the world. But this cooperation did not happen in a vacuum. The timing was politically charged. The operation operation came amid sustained pressure from President Donald Trump on Mexico's government to intensify its crackdown on drug cartels. Washington had repeatedly warned of stronger measures, including potential military strikes inside Mexico, if fentanyl trafficking was not curbed. Trump had already designated El Mencho's cartel a foreign terrorist organization. The pre-dawn assault on February 22nd was decisive. Forces seized armored vehicles, 7 long firearms, 2 rocket launchers, and other military-grade equipment from the site, underscoring the sheer scale of the cartel's militarized capabilities. 8 CJNG members were killed in the initial raid. 3 Mexican soldiers were injured, but none were killed at the site. But the story did not end at Tapalpa, not by a long shot, because in a parallel action on that very same day, Mexican troops eliminated Hugo Cesar Macias Ureña, known as El Tuli, El Mencho's right-hand man, in El Grullo, Jalisco, after he fired on troops during an escape attempt. El Tuli had been a key financial operator, and perhaps most chillingly, he had allegedly been offering bounties of 20,000 pesos, around $100 per killed soldier, and was actively coordinating the reprisal attacks that were about to engulf the entire nation. The cartel's head was gone, its right hand was gone, but the body of the beast was very much alive, and it was furious. What followed was not just retaliation, it was a coordinated, multi-state assault on the fabric of Mexican society, a declaration of war against the very concept of government authority, and the scale of it was something that even the most battle-hardened security analysts had never witnessed before. And the connections to this cartel stretched far beyond Mexico's borders. El Mencho had started as a low-level street dealer in Northern California, arrested in 1992 in Sacramento for conspiring to sell heroin. He was deported back to Mexico and built an empire, but his family's tentacles never left American soil. El Mencho's son-in-law, Cristian Fernando Gutierrez Ochoa, was sentenced to 11 years in prison for money laundering tied to the cartel, after allegedly faking his own death to live a life of luxury in Riverside, California. And if that was not surreal enough, El Mencho's youngest daughter also reportedly operates a coffee shop in the area. A coffee shop, the daughter of the most wanted drug lord on the planet, serving lattes in Southern California. The layers of absurdity in this story are almost as deep as the layers of violence. Within hours of El Mencho's death, that is the kind of operational capacity that would make most conventional militaries envious, and the violence that accompanied those roadblocks was staggering. The ambushes were ruthless. In Jalisco alone, 25 National Guard members were killed in 6 separate incidents. 1 state prosecutor's agent was killed, 1 prison guard was killed, a pregnant woman was caught in the crossfire and lost her life, and on the cartel side, approximately 34 to 42 suspected members were killed in the clashes that followed, bringing the total death toll to at least 73 people. Defense Secretary Trevilla's emotional breakdown during the February 23rd press conference, where he paused mid-condolences for his fallen troops, humanized the toll on security forces. This was not a man reading a script. This was a military commander who had just lost 25 of his soldiers in a single day, men and women who went out to serve their country and came home in body bags. And every single one of those losses was a direct consequence of killing El Mencho. The cartel had answered, and its answer was written in blood. Now you understand the operation, you understand the raid, you understand the retaliation, but what you don't understand yet is just how far that violence spread and what it means for Mexico, the United States, and the world going forward. That is part 3. The aftermath and what comes next. When a cartel loses its leader, it does not mourn quietly. It screams, it burns, it destroys everything within reach. And when that cartel happens to be the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, the most violent, most expansive, and most heavily armed criminal organization in all of Mexico, that scream echoes across an entire hemisphere. And that is exactly what happened in the hours and days following El Mencho's death.
Chaos erupting at a Mexico airport after the death of El Mencho, one of the country's most powerful cartel leaders.
Within hours of the raid, CJNG affiliates launched coordinated attacks across at least 20 states, erecting over 250 roadblocks by hijacking and setting fire to vehicles, buses, and trucks, effectively paralyzing highways and urban areas. In Guadalajara and Puerto Vallarta, plumes of smoke rose from torched businesses, gas stations, and convenience stores, turning vibrant cities into ghost towns.
Again, no one is stopping, no one's responding. You can clearly see that security forces are overwhelmed here.
Overwhelmed. That single word tells you everything you need to know about the hours that followed El Mencho's death. The most powerful military and law enforcement apparatus in Latin America was, for those terrifying hours, overwhelmed by the fury of a single cartel. And the cartel was not finished.
Yeah, look at this. This is just, I mean, pure chaos here, right? With a cartel member rolling up, guns pulled, just to try and set this gas station ablaze. Look at this.
Airports in Guadalajara and Puerto Vallarta faced severe disruptions, with major airlines including United, Delta, and Aeromexico canceling or suspending flights, stranding over 1,000 people. Tourists at locations like the Guadalajara Zoo were stranded overnight. Schools and universities across the nation suspended classes, public transportation halted, and the embassies of the United States, Canada, and other nations issued shelter-in-place orders for their citizens.
Canadians in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico are being ordered to shelter in place.
Now think about that for a second. Think about what it means when multiple sovereign nations are telling their citizens to hide inside their hotel rooms because a drug lord was killed. That is the power of CJNG. That is the reach of El Mencho's empire, an empire that, even in death, could terrorize an entire continent.
We're anxious right now. I mean, my heart's beating. We're anxious. I just want to be on good old USA soil. In the snow. We don't even care if it's snowing.
Over 70 attacks in Guanajuato alone damaged banks and stores. Puerto Vallarta resembled a war zone with gas station fires and smoke plumes forcing flight cancellations. CJNG propaganda even exaggerated the turmoil, falsely claiming control of airports to undermine government authority. And when 23 inmates escaped from a prison in Puerto Vallarta during the chaos, the situation seemed almost apocalyptic. El Mencho's death creates a power vacuum in an organization with no clear successor. His son, El Menchito, is imprisoned in the United States. Experts like Anthony Placido, a former DEA intelligence head, and David Mora from the International Crisis Group predict infighting among factions, potentially fragmenting the cartel and inviting turf battles with rivals like the Sinaloa cartel.
There are 3 people who are going to compete to become the new leader of the cartel, and the political protection will go on.
Historical precedents paint a grim picture. The 2010 killing of Ignacio Nacho Coronel didn't destroy the drug trade. It actually gave birth to CJNG itself when the Sinaloa cartel splintered. The 2019 attempted arrest of Ovidio Guzman Lopez, El Chapo's son, led to the paralysis of an entire city and forced the government to release him. Experts call this demonstrative violence, the cartel's way of punishing the state and signaling that it is still very much alive.
It is a very superficial way to attack the cartels and doesn't speak to a sort of more profound, deep extraction of their roots that are so deeply embedded in Mexico.
And that is the most sobering takeaway of all. The death of El Mencho, while a tactical victory for the Mexican government, does not address the root causes of cartel dominance, corruption, poverty, and insatiable U.S. drug demand. The so-called kingpin strategy has been criticized for decades because every time a head is cut off, 2 more grow in its place. The chaos raised immediate concerns for the 2026 FIFA World Cup, with matches planned in Guadalajara and Monterrey, both located in cartel-influenced areas. Analysts warn of ripple effects on U.S.-Mexico trade, particularly near-shoring logistics in industrial hubs near Jalisco, where instability could deter investment. Because in the vacuum left by El Mencho's death, CJNG's sprawling networks in fentanyl trafficking, methamphetamine production, extortion, fuel theft, kidnapping, and migrant smuggling, with operations spanning the U.S., Asia, and Europe, now have no singular authority guiding them. Factions will split. Lieutenants will declare themselves kings, and the violence that follows internal cartel wars is often far worse than anything directed at the state. And there it is, the World Cup, the world's biggest sporting event, scheduled to take place in just 4 months in a country that is currently reeling from a cartel war triggered by the death of its most powerful criminal. Millions of fans from around the world are expected to flood into Mexican cities, the very same cities where, just weeks earlier, cartel gunmen were torching gas stations and ambushing soldiers. If that does not send a chill down your spine, nothing will. The violence in Guadalajara comes just a few months before Mexico's second-largest city is scheduled to host FIFA World Cup matches, and the economic implications are staggering. Some business owners near the U.S.-Mexico border were already feeling the pinch. When Mexico bleeds, the United States feels the wound. When cartels burn highways in Jalisco, businesses close near the San Isidro border crossing, the border is not a wall, it is a membrane, and violence passes through it with terrifying ease. So, where does this leave us? El Mencho is dead. His body lies in a Mexico City morgue, awaiting a family that must decide whether to bury a king in silence or in spectacle. The The Mexican army stands guard, rifles loaded, prepared for whatever that decision brings. 25 National Guard soldiers will never come home to their families. The highways of Jalisco still smell like ash and burning rubber. Over 1,000 tourists were stranded, terrified, in hotel rooms that were supposed to be their vacation sanctuaries. And somewhere in the mountains, in safe houses scattered across 20 states, the next generation of cartel leaders is already plotting, already scheming, already preparing for the war that everyone knows is coming. Because in Mexico's narco world, the death of a king is never the end of the story. It is only ever the beginning of the next chapter. And that next chapter, the one where factions splinter, where lieutenants turn on each other, where rival cartels smell blood in the water and move in for the kill, that chapter is being written right now, in real time, in the streets and mountains and hidden compounds of a nation that has been at war with itself for decades. The funeral, whenever it happens, will not be an ending. It will be an announcement, a signal to every criminal, every soldier, every government official, and every ordinary citizen in Mexico that the rules of the game have changed. And nobody, absolutely nobody, knows who will write the new ones. If you found this story as gripping as we found it researching it, hit that subscribe button, drop your thoughts in the comments below, and stay tuned, because this story is far from over.